Howdy there. This is Benjamin Boyce, and welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. Today's guest is Scott Newgent, who's a trans man and a Spitfire or a Firebrand, whichever is the better one of those two. He tells me about his trans journey and his ethical quandary right now, watching certain strains of the medical industry, the psychological industry, and the media industry push young people, specifically children, down lifelong medicalization in order to affirm their gender identity. This is a pull, no punches conversation, and I know a number of you are going to get a kick out of Scott. So here he is. What is kind of your transition story rooted in?
When I was younger, I had one sister. I had a father that was a very masculine father. He played professional baseball, then he raced motorcycles, and so for me, I always wanted to go down that road, but I had a very loving and open father. So growing up, I raced motocross and desert, played sports year round. I would say things like, to my uncle one time, I remember I said, I want to be a boy for Christmas. And he just looked at me and said, well, you can't do that. And I just kind of went, well, that sucks, and just kind of moved on with it. But as I grew up, I came into more of my femininity. My other side of my family, my mother is very feminine. I call her, the original misgendered woman. Everybody always thought she was a drag queen growing up because she was just so feminine. So I kind of delved into that side a little bit, and it worked for me. I was able to do what I call get into drag very well. And I think if you saw pictures of me in business and stuff, I made sure that I fit in and I didn't look on the outside, but there was always a discomfort. But for me, it wasn't tearing at my soul like it was for some.
And how did that discomfort grow into something that you wanted to deal with head on?
Well, it's funny that you asked that, because my personality, for whatever reason, has never been one that has been very feminine. I've always kind of been an in-your-face alpha person, and I always have been, and I always will be. But I fell in love with somebody that was a very, very devout Catholic, very, very devout Catholic. Unfortunately, her family did not accept homosexuality at all. And so when we got together, I was kind of known as the lesbian devil, but nobody ever met me. They never saw pictures of me. So I kind of was going through that process when Jenner was transitioning, and I just said, you know what? I've always thought about it. Seems like it would fix the solution. It seems like a Disney fairy tale. Well, why don't we give it a shot? So.
And so you then pursued transition to fit in socially, or to bring your, I guess, who you were into a more socially acceptable outside performance, specifically for that family, but for the world in general.
I think that was the icing on the cake. It definitely was not the whole reason why I did this. I am actually happy with my transition. I wouldn't change it. I would change some of the decisions I made with some of the surgeons that I chose and some of the processes that I did, but I wouldn't change it. And you find a lot of people that transition and find on the other side, go, wow, this is really good for me. Most of them will say, I wouldn't do it again, though. But I wouldn't change it if I could. And that's kind of how
How did the hormones affect you? Did it kind of accentuate things that had already been a part of you, or did it fill out certain aspects of life?
Well, the hormones, these are things that we're not talking about, and we need to talk about. The transition process, when you have been kind of socialized as male or female, regardless of whether you realize it, you have been socialized to one aspect of the gender. It doesn't matter how butch a woman is. It doesn't matter how feminine a male is. You are still socialized for that. So when you start to go into the transition process, and we're not talking about this with kids, there's a social aspect to it. There's an anxiety aspect to it on top of the way you process thoughts are completely different. What you thought you were acceptable was acceptable for, other people's behavior might not be acceptable once those hormones start to come in place. So your mind goes through this, I call it a fight for dominance. You have a fight for an estrogen dominance or your birth hormone, and then you have the synthetic dominance. And they go at it for several months. And so it takes a while for you to get that balance, get that structure. And what happens is that one day you wake up and go, everybody has changed in my life. My best friend, I'm not really fond of that person anymore. And this person that I thought was an asshole is actually really nice now. And so I always say that you have an organic matter. When you pull out one dominant hormone and then you put in another, you get a completely different person. Wow. And that is very stressful. It's a lot of anxiety. And you wake up thinking, how everybody has changed in my life. And the honesty is that you're the person that has changed. And so you have to restructure your life around that. So there's lots of emotional stuff that we don't talk about with transition. We need to.
What were some of the practices or tools that you ended up using to assist you in that sea change of personality?
It's kind of you discover it on your own. It's not anything that there's no outline for it. I mean, you could search on the internet all you want. You can read all you want, but all you're going to get are Disney experiences. And that's wrong. So it makes you feel like, hey, there's something wrong with me. There's a process when you start to go through hormones where you get the, I call it the, what the fuck are they? Kind of a look. And you're walking out in public, and you see people have that where people are like, is that a girl or is that a boy? And people are trying to pick their pronouns because whether we realize it or not, we are structured from very little to call males by male pronouns, females by female pronouns. When you have the what the fuck are you kind of stage, it's very anxiety ridden for the person that's dealing with it and for everybody else that's dealing with it too. And we don't talk about those things.
Yeah. What are some of the realizations that you had about the expectations of being a woman that, I guess, the positives and negatives that you don't miss and that you might have found useful?
That's funny. There's a story probably a couple of years ago. My daughter just thinks this is hilarious. We were out to lunch one time, and I had fully transitioned by that time, and so there was no mistaking that I looked male. And as a female, one of the things that I learned very easily, and I actually have this in male too, is I'm a huge flirt. I'm a huge flirt with males, females. I don't really care. I'm just a flirt. And it was acceptable to flirt with males as a female, especially, when I was out and about. So we were at lunch and I had completely transitioned and my daughter needed something. And I stopped the server. I said, excuse me, sweetie, can you get this, something for my daughter? And he looked at me and I gave him a wink. I went, thanks a lot. And he walked away like, fucking asshole. And I thought to myself, my daughter looked across the table and goes, you don't look like a woman anymore, right? And I went, fuck. So there's lots of stuff like that happen. It's funny, but the way you society is very, very different. And before I transitioned, I was a powerhouse business saleswoman. I mean, when I walked in the room, people are like, who the fuck is that?
Okay.
I had the confidence of a lion. When I spoke, people listened. And I found myself going through the transition process that in the middle of it, it was like I didn't want to leave my house. I didn't want to talk. I had lost that charisma that I once had. I found myself questioning things. And because I was trying to figure out who I was. And that happens in puberty, right? Where as kids, we kind of go, okay, wait a second. What in the fuck's going on? I used to present this way, and then all of a sudden I'm feeling different this way, and I'm trying to find my footing. I'm trying to find everything. And I went from a powerhouse to just a mouse in a matter of probably about 9 months. And it took me a couple of years to come out and find my footing again. These are also things that we're not talking about.
What age were you when you began the transition?
42.
Oh, okay. And what are your thoughts, or what are your kind of generally your views about transition happening younger and younger?
I think it's criminal. I really do. I think we are on the forefront of seeing something that people will read in history and go, how in the fuck did that happen? I think there's going to be people that are going to be thrown in jail soon. I think that we're going to discover some pretty nasty, nasty things, some nasty marketing that we're doing to children. So here's the thing, Benjamin. For the first time in history, a marginalized group has a dollar sign attached to it. So think about it this way. It took 60 years for the LGBT to get same-sex marriage, right? And what did we have to do? We had to convince society, truthfully, that we were not going after their kids. We just wanted to be able to see our loved one if they were dying. We wanted to be able to, get insurance together. We wanted to celebrate our love financially in all different ways. It had nothing to do with children, right? That took 60 years. So now the trans community is being monetized. And all of a sudden, it has only taken 3 to 5 years for everybody to accept the trans phenomenon. So you have to think to yourself, why is that? It's because there's a dollar sign attached to it. It's the fact that Lupron makes $24,000 a year for every child that gets on hormone blockers. So if we take a study that was done in a very small area of the UK that had 97 kids, and we fast forward several years, and that 97 goes to over 4,000, we're talking about $2 million worth of revenue to over $100 million in revenue in a size that would fit into Texas 15 times. Now multiply that by the world. This is $1 billion industry. Medical transitioning is no place for a child. And unfortunately, people are not looking at this from a constructive standpoint. What they're doing is they're reading these studies that are 2 to 5 years long, but they're not taking a look at the long term. We only have one long-term study that was done by medically transitioned adults. And what it found is exactly what's happening right now, which is the Christmas present phase, which is oh, look, I've got a new hair on my face, or my face looks more feminine, and everybody's getting really excited about that. Well, that hasn't transitioned into oh, fuck, what am I? Who are they? Male, female pronoun. It hasn't transitioned into finishing all of the surgeries. And what they found in that study is about 7 to 10 years, suicidal ideation is the highest after medical transition. And the reason why is because nobody knows what happens from 0 to 7 years. And at 7 years, you can usually talk to anybody that has medically transitioned, and they will say, holy fuck, that was a lot harder than what I thought. And I don't know if I would do it again. And those are adults that they did that study on, that contemplated that made decisions when their brains were fully matured. A lot of them decided it was the wrong thing to do. It was the wrong thing to do. And detransitioned. The ones that didn't, they get to a point where they go, okay, I'm either going to have peace or I'm going to fucking kill myself. And unfortunately, we're not there with kids yet. Okay. And that 7 years to 10 years is coming. And we're going to have a suicide epidemic that this world has never seen. And the people that are pushing medical transition, like the Susie Greens, the mermaids, the Luprons, the Dr. Cranes, all these people that are monetizing things, it has nothing to do with love. It has to do with they have a dollar sign on their head. And that is a really sad place to be in society, because if we get to the point where we throw kids under the bus for money, we might as well just, come out of our houses and live with animals.
One of the ways in which this conversation is fraught or is difficult is because we are dealing with a marginalized group, and that marginalization is used to shut down conversation. And the most obvious example right now, if you're on Twitter, is the way in which J.K. Rowling is being, I guess you could just say, treated by a certain contingent of the radical pro-trans side. How do we go through and separate that marginalization or separate out that potential harm of erasing somebody's existence and focus on the facts? What is needed to shift the conversation toward this idolizing or coddling of the marginalized in order to focus on the deterring the further marginalization of gay kids, let's say.
Rollins, right?
Pardon?
Rollins? Talking about
J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter.
Yeah. I have to say that with all respect, that woman has balls of steel. I mean, what she has done is, I take my hat off to her. I really do. And I don't say that about a lot of people. I don't idolize very many people. I do her. And I'll tell you why. Because for her to say something like that, somebody that has fought for LGBT rights, a person that has stood up and fought for gays and lesbians and has made me watch about 350 fucking hours of those movies with my son. I mean, for somebody that is that famous, that has that much to lose, to say, listen, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. What it's done is that it's gotten it to the forefront. To answer your question is this. I said this about 14 months ago. There was me and maybe one or two other people on Twitter that were talking about medically transitioning kids or about biology. And at first, people really didn't like me until they understood where I stood and what I stood for. And then all of a sudden, people that were bashed by, trans women like Yannick or whatever her name is, they came out of being shell-shocked and went, hey, wait a second, this trans guy is kind of, making some sense. And I said, the only people that are going to stop the travesty of what's going to happen, only people that are going to save children are going to be transgender adults. Unfortunately, the only people that are at the forefront right now, and I apologize if this offends you, are white, straight Christian males. And unfortunately, nobody listens to them anymore. Nobody listens to them. And the reason why is because the people that are my age are the people that were the ones that saw all the coming out stories, all the horrible things that happened to gay and lesbian kids coming, the therapy, the conversion therapy, the hate. And we are all the ones that were in middle school and high school saying, I would never do that to my kid. I would never. I would accept my kid from the beginning. These are all the parents. So all these parents are thinking that they're doing the right thing. And the truth is that there are some that benefit from medical transition. I was one of them. And there are others out there. Not enough for this billion-dollar industry, so they have created it. So to answer your question, white straight males need to step aside and they need to let rational trans come in and say, listen, this has nothing to do with acceptance. It has nothing to do with acceptance. In fact, us having to focus on saving kids makes it so I can't figure out a way to protect trans women. I can't figure out the kind of rights that I need. I can't figure out what we need to call ourselves, how we need to say, you know what, to be a trans woman, you have to go through this much, hormone therapy. And then, you go through here and then the pronoun. None of us can figure that out because we're all the rational trans, just like sitting behind going, excuse me, we're getting ready to experience a suicide epidemic. These kids are going to start fucking blowing their heads off. And we need to stop this before we can figure out our rights.
So what are some of the steps then that you think need to happen in order for, your argument to get to the forefront? And what is that argument? Or what is the basis of it?
Well, first of all, our rational trans voices are not amplified in the media. They're just not. Unfortunately, society feels like it has to do with rights. The media doesn't really care about people that are outside of the the kind of railroad of what they want us to think. So our voices are not on the forefront. The voices that are on the forefront are the people that are not transgender or are making money off of transitioning. So I mean, I've started an organization called Trey Voices, Trans Rational Educational Voices, and I have decided that if the media is not going to put us in front of people, I'll put us in front of people. Mm-hmm. So I created a tour that's going to start off in November, if COVID allows. It's going to be some of the most strategic voices within the trans community. We're going to speak at Parliament. After Parliament, we're going to have a venue in London. After London, it's going to be Ireland, Scotland. We're going to go to Australia, Canada, and then back to the United States. Now, there's also going to be some more controversial people that are not trans on the tour. I'm going to make it so they can't ignore us. And if they do, I'll just scream louder and louder and louder. I sold advertising. I was an advertising executive. I'll turn it up loud.
So you've got your lion back then, and you're going to deploy it. Okay.
Yeah.
And the first and foremost, the front line is to do with child transition. That is the number one issue.
It's the number one issue. Absolutely. I have 3 kids, Benjamin. I have 3 kids at the age that they're medically transitioning kids. And the thing that scares the hell out of me is if that one of my kids told me that they were transgender, I would have been the first person in line at the Dr. Crane's office. I would have been arguing with their other mother about how she was so transphobic and just a horrible fucking person. Okay. I would be the person that I'm looking at right now and going, snap out of it.
Okay.
So I understand where people are coming from with that, but we have got to save kids. We've got to save kids first. We absolutely have to.
So on that note, then, what are some of the key principles that changed you from somebody who would have been pushing their child toward getting all the transition that they needed to somebody who, I guess you haven't explained your position now, watchful waiting or this other position now. What was animating you before?
It's a good question. I've done it. And not a lot of people have. I've done it. Medical transitioning is brutal. Okay. So it is a watch and wait for me. It is a let's wait till kids have fully mature brains, until they can, weigh the pros and cons. This is, I told a mom that just DM'd me last night. Here's the thing, is there are some kids that need to medically transition, and I know that. And I was actually talking to another transgender person that feels the same way I do. And unfortunately, there are a very, 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 very few that would benefit from medical transitioning as a child. But there is no diagnosis, there's no test, there's no scientific, doing a pick of blood and, figuring out blood sugar and saying, you need to be on this medicine. It is an I think, I want, I feel.
Yeah.
Until that changes, the only people that should be making those decisions are adults about their own lives. And we need to have a structure, a guideline of pros and cons of medical transitioning. Okay. When people are old enough to decide that this is something that I want to do, A, B, they have information that is not a Disney version, so that we don't have so many people detransitioning, then I'm all for it. Mm. And I told that mom that. I said that your child might need to medically transition. Might need to medically transition at 23 or 25 or 22, whenever that person's brain is fully matured. And I would tell your child, like I would tell my child, that if you are the person that will benefit from medical transition, I will be the biggest cheerleader. I will design uniforms for everybody in the family. You're going to get your, first shot of testosterone. I'll have a pile of people, cheering you on, but do the work first before doing that. And the work is to grow up, to read, to analyze. We need to have organizations. We need to have therapists that walk these kids. This is what happens when you do this. These are the options that you take. This is, what you have to look forward to. Just like you look forward to get your driver's license at 16, you can look forward to medically transitioning at 22, 25, 18, whatever it's decided. But this is something that is a decision when you're able to make that decision with a fully developed brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what are some of the other things that people need to understand looking at this dialogue from the outside? Just the passerbys watching Twitter fights and stuff like that.
I think the number one thing is that there needs to be some healthy skepticism coming in. People need to be held accountable. People need to know that Lupron, the hormone blocker, and they say that, oh, we're not using that in the NHS, we're not using that in the UK. Well, dumbass, Advil, and then you can have an off-brand of Advil. It's the same fucking thing.
Okay.
Lupron was deemed a criminal enterprise by the U.S. government in 2001 for false advertising, bribery, suppression of side. Exactly what they're doing right now.
Okay.
And they had to pay $874 million for doing exactly what they're doing right now. And they're the ones saying it's safe. It's safe to use hormone blockers. We can jump over the fact that you have mental development. You have your bone structure, comes together in strength. You have osteoporosis at 24 is not a big deal. Nobody knows what's going to happen with these kids, unfortunately. We don't know. What we do know is that long-term synthetic use or long-term use of synthetic hormones causes problems in a lot of people. Not a lot, but look at these 30 years on synthetic hormones, these trans women that are in wheelchairs, the stroke victims, the suicide, all these kind of things. We're not talking about that. Trans health is experimental, and get sick and you'll figure out real quick how experimental it is. Nobody knows, because up until now, medical transition was a very, 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 very rare thing. So we don't know what these kids are in for. What we do know is their life expectancy goes down by at least 10 to 15 years. What parent can decide that for somebody? Mm-hmm. Would you be able to decide for your kid that, 10, 15 years, we'll cut that off. We'll cut that off for an experimental procedure that we have no idea how it's going to affect you. But you know what? Fuck it. Let's do it, because I don't want to go against the LGBT. Sorry, I'm going against the LGBT.
Why do you think that has been, how in the world did we come to this juncture where it seems like you're saying that the medical industry is motivated, but it seems like they've used some aspects of LGBT rights to kind of get their way. Is it a kind of a cloak and dagger thing, or is it just like a confluence of intentions that are just working in this way?
I think it's a culmination of a whole bunch of stuff. I think it's just the time period. I think it is the cloak and dagger stuff. I think that PR people are brilliant. Doozy Green of Mermaids should be paid about $1 billion for her marketing schemes. The way that she has placed, this kind of stuff, the way that she's placed this information in young children's hands, very moldable, placing herself right in front of the LGBT. And unfortunately, and I'm going to piss a lot of people off, which is, something I do a lot. The LGBT is not an organization that I think holds anything to me. I mean, I was talking to my ex the other day, and if somebody told me that, hey, the LGBT, they're going to have a new flag for people that like to fuck dogs in public, I'd be like, sounds about right. Sounds about right. We have stepped over issues being gay and lesbian. We have stepped over the line. We do not have leaders that say, wait a second. Fetishes are not part of sexuality. Sexuality is men. Homosexuality is men that are attracted to men, women that are attracted to women, and bisexual people. These are things that we need to move forward. These are things that we need to protect. We do not need to protect flags for people that like to fuck dogs in public. I mean, unfortunately, that's what's happening with the LGBT, and there's nobody that's saying anything.
Yeah.
Because people that say stuff are getting railroaded, like Rowling.
Okay. Yeah. Why do you think that the LGBT, as you call it, has proceeded down this path? Why is there no checks and balances?
Anybody?
Pardon me?
Nobody wants to offend anybody.
Okay. And what is where did that come from? What is that about? Because
where are the people in the LGBT that are standing up saying, excuse me, gay pride, it's not about gender. Gay pride's about sexuality. transgender issues have nothing to do with sexuality. They need to be separated like they did, with the LGBT. We need to hold people accountable. We need to protect children first, because if we don't, we are no society. We need to make sure that, what we're putting forward there is basically that if gay and lesbian kids are, if there are gay and lesbian kids growing up, that they know that they're going to have a loving community once they grow up. But until then, we're going to leave them alone. That's what the trans community needs to do. They need to know that there's going to be a community when they grow up. But other than that, we need to take our hands off of kids, because kids are too vulnerable.
What have you been interacting with the younger folk, and what are some of the things that you tend to say or that you think that they need to hear about this?
I don't talk to children under 18. It's not my place to talk to children under 18. I would have a shit fit if somebody talked to my kids about that stuff. So I don't do that at all. Now, if parents talk to me, I'll talk to them. Some of them have wanted me to talk to their children, and I have. I have a way with talking to kids to redirect them with love. And if their parents are okay with that, I talk to them beforehand and tell them what I'm going to say and make sure that they're okay with that. But I have no right to talk to anybody else's kid. Just like Susie Green has no right to talk to anybody else's kid. She needs to get the fuck away from kids.
Well, okay, let me rephrase that. If a kid ended up watching this because they're questioning these topics, what are some of the things that you would want them to know? If somebody in their teenage years.
That's what I would want to know. With all the negativity that's coming out of my mouth to the trans community, about the trans community, I want them to understand that I am trans and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And medical transition has helped me, and it does help some people. But you're a kid right now. Be a kid. Just like when I went to my dad at 15 and told him that I was a lesbian, he said to me, well, that's great. You're 14. Who are you having sex with? And I went, nobody. He said, okay, so you're a kid right now. So I go, okay. And he's like, don't put yourself on a cliff and jump off without being able to climb back up. So I did. A couple of years later, I came back and went, hey, Dad, I'm bisexual. My dad went, great, you got a better chance of a date on Saturday night. Although I don't know why anybody would be attracted to men. They're fucking horrible. So, it was just keeping it light. And then again, he came back to me and said, who are you having sex with? I went, nobody. He went, again, we're talking about the cliff. And so that allowed me to figure out who I was. So childhood is figuring out who you are. Childhood is figuring out and thinking that one year that you need to medically transition, and the next year you need to do something else. The next year, you need to do something else. Childhood is not the place where you jump off a cliff. It's not. And it needs to be a loving place. If you grow up and you decide you need to medically transition, then I want to give you all the information for you to make a choice about medically transitioning that is the right choice for you. It's not your parents. It's not your parents' choice. It's not society's choice. It is yours and yours alone to make, without anybody pushing anything on you. That's what I would tell them.
And what are some of the things that you would say to people who have begun the process of transition that are experiencing those that sea change that you were talking about? I kind of already asked you that, but what are some of the ways in which you reconfigured yourself and kept hope during like some difficult periods?
I got so sick for 17 months after my phalloplasty that I really wasn't able to do anything but think. There was just a lot of thought that came into it, and it took me a long time to come to the point where it was something I could say that, you know what, I did this and this was the right thing for me to do. I cannot be hiding behind an illusion anymore, a delusion. And unfortunately, we do that as transgender people. We all do. From the beginning, we want to convince people that I was born in the wrong body. I was supposed to be male or I was supposed to be female, because it soothes us, because it makes it not about our decision. So we go through that process. Once that process, is over, and you come to a point, and I think it's one of the reasons why the suicide is so high, is we just get forced to deal with biological reality, and so it takes a long time to think through that process. If we allow kids to keep being delusional, young people that are starting to medically transition, that it's okay to it's okay to be delusional. It's okay to think that biology is incorrect. I know it feels really good, all those charts that Susie Green does, on mermaids. I know that feels really good, but it's not logic. Let's express and open up the fact that this is reality. And the reality is that being trans means that you're not male, you're not female. You change a birth hormone, and you modify it with a synthetic hormone. You are no longer male or female. And you know what? That's really cool, Benjamin. It's really, really cool. I've seen life as a female, and I've seen life as a male. And that is the coolest. It's a really cool experience. Why can't that be enough? Why do we have to create a delusion that's going to come back and just punch you right in the face? Because it does.
Yeah.
It punches people right in the face.
That is one thing that I've found positive about speaking with trans people, is that they get to have a different perspective on things that most of us kind of either fight against or take for granted, but are kind of locked inside of. And so in that spirit, what are some of the advice that you can give as being a man, having been a woman? Like, what are some of the tips and tricks to being a good guy?
Go there, do we? The one benefit of being a trans man, there is one huge benefit of being a trans man, and that is that we know how to make love to women. You can't fake it with us. We know. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. That is a benefit. There's lots of benefits of medically transitioning. There's some really cool things. I'm involved in conversations I never was involved with as a woman. I see things differently. Hold on here a second. I see things differently. I hear things differently. I have a lot more respect for men than I used to.
Based on what? Like, what is?
I think men have really incredible, deep hearts, feelings that a lot of them don't really tell a lot of people, because they're afraid that it might be just a little bit unmasculine. I think I've gained a lot of respect for men. Honestly, I've been pretty scared by some of them in conversations. Honestly, that kind of like, wow, I didn't want to hear that. But in the majority, I've gained a lot of respect for men.
Is that something that you experienced when you went on to testosterone, like having to deal with a different palette of emotions, a different set of intensities? And
actually, one of the things that it's quite interesting, and I talk about this with other trans adults, is that I used to be a crier. I mean, I would cry. I'd watch a Hallmark commercial. My kids used to make fun of me. I'd be like, God, it's a really sad commercial. I mean, crying constantly. And now it's like, I need to cry. I really need to cry. I really need to figure out a way to let that energy out. And I can't do it. So there's lots of things that change. Yeah.
Do you end up sinking that energy into something outside of you, I guess, like a physical activity or building something, or just getting mad at a TV remote and throwing it across the room? Is there...
Yeah, I find that my fuse is a lot more extended, but once that fuse is there, it's just like, I actually talked about the TV. I just broke a TV probably about 2 months ago because I got so fucking pissed off. But yeah, the fuse is extended, but once it gets there, I get a little bit more.
So your organization, could you pronounce the name again? Trav, and you guys are going to...
Trey Voices.
Trey Voices. So what are some of the things you're going to be doing? You're going on a speaking tour. Is there... there we go. I'll link that in the description. Is there... what other resources need to be out there for gender questioning or trans individuals or parents thereof?
There's so much that we need to do. We need to categorize and define what transgender is and what it is not. We have to put safeguards in place for trans women. It scares me, some of the stuff that they deal with. But then again, I can't until women are safe, until kids are safe. We can't do anything until those two people are safe. So there's lots of stuff that we have to do, but we're fighting with a $1 billion industry. We've got to stop kids from medically transitioning first. We have to.
Okay. So the priorities this is really interesting, kind of moral matrix that you're showing, is that you want to protect kids and then women and then the trans adults.
Yes.
And why that? What's the reasoning behind that? You've expressed some with...
There's an overcompensation in our society. There's an overcompensation. Society is thrown to the wolves before a marginalized group is. And society is thrown to the wolves at a huge, unbalanced level. It has tipped. It used to be that society didn't care about marginalized people, and they walked all over them, gays and lesbians, everybody. They didn't care. It was the white straight males that everybody protected. Now it is the opposite, and it has gone too far. It has gone too far. So we are overcompensated. Marginalized groups are overcompensated now.
Mm-hmm. And why is it important, or what's your view on the importance of protecting women, and in what way do women you think need to be protected in relationship to women's rights and trans rights? What are the key issues there from your perspective?
Well, I think I understand what you're asking. Here's what I believe needs to happen with women. I think that trans women need to get the fuck out of women's sports. I don't think it's fair. I think that people that have transitioned know that it's not fair. It doesn't matter how long somebody's on estrogen. You're not going to get rid of the organ growth that happens with males. You're not going to get rid of the lung capacity, the muscle mass, everything. It doesn't matter how long a man's on testosterone. They're not going to lose all the benefits physically. They're not. So they need to get out of sport, number one. Number two, women's positions need to be for women. We need to protect women first. And then once that happens, we can start protecting the trans. And unfortunately, women are getting thrown under the bus, and it seems to be okay with everybody and their uncle, and it's just not.
So what are some of the things on your plate right now then? You guys are getting up this coalition going. What are some of the steps you guys are making or working on?
What we're doing right now is I'm talking to some lords to speak in Parliament. I'm putting together a line of speakers. I'm working on some pretty controversial speakers that will join us. I need funding. Unfortunately, there are no companies that are coming out saying we want to stand with this rational side of the transgender community, because it's too controversial now. So I need to get venues. I need to get advertising, PR, and so we need donors. It's what we need.
And how does one go about making donors then? It's all got to be individual, or are there any organizations?
Right now I have not had any organizations reach out to me, but one thing that I have known, Benjamin, is that when I decide to do something, my brain plays chess. I'll figure it out. There'll be a corporation that comes on. I guarantee it. I just don't see it right now, but it'll happen.
Okay. And what about spaces for discussion? Where are some places where people can go, or are there forums for this sort of discussion? Do they need to happen? Is that what needs to happen? These panels and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's organizations like called Our Duty within the UK that speaks about medically transitioning kids. You've got organizations like Fourth Wave Now, which is a feminist organization that talks about women's rights. That these are pretty rational people. They're not hateful. There are some, but not very many. Most of them want to find common ground, and that's what I think people need to understand, is that the transphobia that everybody's talking about, I haven't seen it. I don't know where it is. If somebody wants to point it out to me, let me know. Most people are accepting. They, even if they don't quite understand it, and for all intent and purposes, I don't either. So I get that. Most people are like, you know what, you do what you do. you do what you do. Just don't hurt anybody else in the process. And we need to get people, society needs to know that most people are like, you know what, do what you do. Just don't hurt anybody else in the process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like what you said about not throwing society under the bus in a way. And that is a very salient conversation to have. If we do need to upgrade society's morality or its ethics, then there's a way to do that that's rational and that includes more and more people into the conversation. It seems that parts of this conversation, whether it's motivated reasoning from companies or from individuals, are shutting down our ability to actually, kind of have an open discussion about this. And they bring out the weapons really early to kind of stop the discussion or just get their way.
You really do. And you know what I find is that if I'm not talking to some crazy asshole that is just basically crazy. And unfortunately, I really believe that those are the people that are on the forefront of the transgender debate, are the ones that are just really delusional. They should not be leading anything. If you put those yahoos aside and just, grab people that might not agree with you completely and totally, if you just sit down and have a conversation, there's a way for us all to come together. But nobody can come together. Nobody can figure things out. Nobody can protect anybody until kids are protected, and kids are not protected right now. They are very, very exposed and vulnerable right now.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'll let you know when this is up, and we can share it around all the social medias. Thanks for granting me the interview. Have you been on other programs yet?
No, it took me, I think we talked, I was pulling up my Skype thing. We talked like 8 months ago. It's been a process. Been a process of, I've been really, really sick, and I'm just now starting to get better. Yeah. Starting to get my fire back. And then it's kind of a process to, I had a parent that I was dealing with that had a child that committed suicide at 19 after their last surgery. And it was basically, I have been saying that's been coming for a long time. Yeah. And to kind of get that slapped in my face about 9 weeks ago, it was a realization. It was, I don't know why, but it made me want to get out of it. I got so pissed off because what I said was happening was starting to happen. And it took me about 2 weeks to kind of go, what are you going to do with this? Are you going to quit now because it really hurts? Or are you going to try to push forward? And it was at that point when I said, I'm going to do this. And the lion came back. So.
Well, good. It sucks that there's a dragon, but it's glad to have warriors rising up.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott.
And I told you 8 months ago you'd be the first one, and you are.
Well, here we are.
Yep.
Let's throw it down. May this be the first of many.
All right, that's good.
All right, Scott. Enjoy karate.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Congratulations for reaching the end of the podcast. If you enjoyed this product, consider donating to this channel via paypal.me/Benjamin Boyce or joining me on Patreon. Also follow me on Twitter at Benjamin A. Boyce. Have a good night.